us from Eventbrite. We are Vida. We are a life and career and leadership and health and wellness coaching company. And my name is Justice, and I'm a relationship strategist here on the team. And what that means is whenever you're ready to explore having a conversation around what coaching is and how it could benefit you, you'll schedule a half-hour conversation with someone on my team, and we'll just dive deeper and figure out, why can't you do this yourself? Why do you need a coach, and how can we help you? With that being said, if you have anything front of mind and you would like to jump into things, my calendar is first come, first serve. And anybody coming to us from a webinar does get your first session free. So something to consider, but I'm going to go ahead and drop my calendar link right here. And then today we are joined by Coach Shari. And so Shari, I'm going to hand the mic over to you.
Hooray. Thank you. Everybody, please don't lose that link in the chat. I think Justice will probably drop it in a couple more times while we speak, but that's probably the most useful link you'll get today. And we're going to follow up with some things in email with some other resources, and it's still the best link you'll get. Justice and his team are so kick-ass. They ask the right questions, talk to you about what your goals are, kind of we just had a little conversation, and match you with the right people to have those conversations. So I really implore you to not lose that link. Before we even get started, I need to apologize for two things today. The first is my cool 1980s headset. I understand that I look like customer service from 1980. I wear this because I moved into a smaller space where I no longer have a door in my office, and the dog occasionally wants to play with you all. So this keeps my voice in your ear and not the dog's voice. The second thing is, I'm sure you can hear I'm a little raspy today, so please just excuse me. I apparently am having an allergy attack that I know that I sound worse and look worse than I feel, so I may even have to blow my nose during this time. So please excuse me for that. Like Justice said, I'm Shari Santoriello. I'm a career and leadership coach here at ALV. And today we are talking about how people pleasing affects your career. And we want to talk about what does it mean? How do you create priority lists for yourself so that you don't have to use people-pleasing behaviors? How to prioritize what those might be? How to build some solutions surrounding that? And then how do we communicate that if we're changing some of our behaviors with our colleagues? So first, I know that Justice asked you to put all of your mics on mute. I'm actually going to ask you that it's okay if you unmute if you want to have a comment, but also feel free to drop some of this in the chat. What does people pleasing mean to you? When you say the words people pleasing, what does it mean? I know for me, it means always putting everybody else ahead of myself. Right? It's consistently putting myself last. And that's always not a good place to be. So, and a lot of times it pushes you out of your comfort zone. So here's just a short list of things that I like to define as people pleasing, which is obviously putting someone's needs above your own. I'm seeing a bunch of you throw that in the chat right now. Avoiding confrontation, that's big, right? People who use people pleasing behaviors, and just so you know, I am a recovering people pleaser myself. Avoiding confrontation is a big one for us, because if we have confrontation when we're people pleasing, it goes into bullet 3, which is we feel like people aren't going to like us, right? If we say something or do something, they might not like us, and then what? So we want everyone to like us. Being a yes person. Perfectionism is something that people don't realize falls into people pleasing, which is when you feel that you have to do everything right all the time. And the reason that falls into people pleasing is a lot of this need for people to like you. If they like you, then it reinforces feelings about yourself or positive self-esteem. So we think if we do everything right, we're going to get opportunities to continue to show that. Plus, people will think higher level things of us, which will then impact our self-esteem. In reality, does it do that? I mean, the question there is, what is the result of constantly people pleasing for you? A lot of times it's burnout, it's stress, it's losing confidence, um, it's feeling like we're being overlooked, it's guilt, resentment, um, really putting ourselves last. So the result is not impacting our career in a positive way, um, at all. I'm just, Justice, I'm letting you know too. I'm kind of trying to read the chat while I'm doing this. So if I'm stuttering a little bit, it's because I asked people to put stuff in the chat. So I want to make sure that I'm seeing what they're saying. Um, Dan, really good comment. I love that you've said that. Dan's comment in the chat is, it can be helpful in learning new items and knowledge. So that is the first positive thing I've seen someone say in terms of people pleasing. And it can be helpful in learning new things, but what comes with that is the question. There's other ways that we could learn new things and gain new knowledge and have new experiences without downplaying ourselves and without downplaying or diminishing our value in terms of somebody else's needs. So that's what we want to talk about today, is how do we figure out what's important for us so that we can all become recovering people pleasers. And let me say, by no means does that mean that that behavior doesn't show up every now and again anyway, because it is a hard balance to want to do a good job and have your career have a good trajectory and never have people pleasing behaviors, because it is a hard balance, because some things, even though they are people pleasing, they are also best business practices sometimes. Being supportive to somebody else on your team isn't always people pleasing. It depends on how you go about doing that. One of the things that I like to use when I'm creating a space for myself to know what's important so that I don't feel that resentment, and I saw a lot of people in the chat say that resentment, that burnout is so powerful, is I create what I call the me list. What the me list is a chart, and yes, I'm a chart person, so I always make charts, and anyone who's on this call who has worked with me knows that I love charts. Every coach here has a bunch of their own bag of tricks, and some people like to use charts, and some people have some other exercises that they do along with our e-coaching modules. This is one of my things, is I'm a chart person. That I like to use. It helps me visualize. I like things to be on paper so I can see. So I'm sharing with you a resource that I use all the time with my clients, which is the me list. And now I'm going to say, excuse me for 1 second while I blow my nose. I'm actually even going to, excuse me 1 second. Thank you for being patient. I apologize for that. Is the me list. And it works like this. The first column is your entire unfiltered list of wants surrounding your career, because that's what we're talking about today. So that can be from the sublime to the ridiculous. It could be surrounding roles. It could be surrounding responsibility. It could be surrounding work relationships with colleagues. It could be um, things about salary. It can be any of those things or none of those things at all. That goes in that first column, that unfiltered list of wants. The second column would then be, how negotiable is this for you overall? This happens outside of wondering what everyone's going to think of you and needing to be liked by everybody. This happens in your own little vacuum. How important is this to me? Is it non-negotiable? Is it somewhat negotiable? Can I feel like maybe it's not nearly as important now that I'm looking back at it? So where does that sit for you? And then always notes. Again, anyone who's worked with me knows I'm a note person because very few things are that black and white in our time in our career. Again, when you work with a coach, they would help you talk through this piece completely. So what are the kinds of things that you want to put in here? Like, what's one of your wants? Maybe you don't want to work at night at all. Maybe that's not something that works for you. Maybe you want a flexible schedule. Whatever those things are would go on this list. I see something in the chat. Someone said non-negotiables equals boundaries too. Yes, absolutely. This is your literal unfiltered list of wants having to do with anything in your career whatsoever. Because these are the things that are going to show you where you're doing your most people pleasing as you prioritize through. If you want, you can take a screenshot of this so you know how to do it, even though it's just so simple. Once you create the me list, the key is to prioritize it. A lot of times it's really easy to prioritize that because you'll pull your non-negotiables to the top. Those are the things that you would think are the most important to you because they are totally non-negotiable. Okay, what are these things? They are the things that we've now put at the top. So for example, let's say one of them is, I don't want to pick up calls after 7 p.m. One of them is, I want to have a voice at the table in a meeting. Maybe one is, I want to know why I've been overlooked for a promotion. So we'll just pick those three. Once you prioritize and you know what's important to you, then we can go figure out where is our support and our solutions surrounding these things. And this is the hard part for people who are people pleasers, because we don't a lot of times look outside of our own self. We think we can do everything. We don't need help. We don't need support. So it becomes difficult for us because if we let anybody in, then we have to acknowledge that maybe we're a people pleaser, because then somebody may see something. And this is where that perfectionism piece comes in. So support and solutions is an important piece of this before you start changing the behaviors. One of the things here is to create a brag book. And it is exactly what it sounds like. What have you done that you've done well? Keep copies of it. Did someone send you an email complimenting you? Keep it. Do you have a particularly good review? Hold on to it. Create a file of all of these things. So it does a few things for you in your journey to be a recovering people pleaser and have it not affect your career negatively. One, it helps with your self-esteem and your confidence. As people pleasers, we tend to suffer from imposter syndrome and some limiting beliefs. We have some coaches on staff who are so savvy about this, who can help you with these pieces in addition. This is one of the first things, is working through your confidence, getting those growth moments in place for yourself. Oftentimes when you look back at a brag book, it's coming from somebody else. So even though we may be in our own heads about this, looking at someone else's words and what someone else thinks was a good idea from us helps. So that's one thing it does for you. The second thing it does for you is, when you are ready to communicate what your needs are so that you can break the people pleasing habit, you have something to go back to. You have support in that place regarding your job. Hey, remember that project that I did with Sam and Pat? Well, after that project, they both sent emails telling me how wonderful it was to work with me and what great leadership skills I had. I just want to share that with you when you're in a one-on-one, if you're asking for a promotion or a raise. Second thing that you want to start working with is documentation. So not only do you want to have your stuff in your brag book, but you want to have some clear procedures and processes that you've used, things that you've contributed. You want to keep copies of that for yourself. You want to document conversations that you may have had. Again, this leaves you in a position to have some support for yourself of, hey, I did that, or I didn't do that, or this worked, it didn't work. So those are other spaces that will give you some support when you're working towards having those conversations. And again, excuse me, I'm just going to mute for one moment. Okay. Next is research. What's important about research is it gives you unbiased background to things that you're feeling. Let's, let's say my example before was prioritizing. You want to know why you got overlooked for a promotion. Well, do some research. What does that next position qualifications look like? Do you meet them? Were they looking for a certification that you may have? So research gives you knowledge and it gives you unbiased knowledge. It's not what somebody said, it's what the experts in this space have said. It's the people who are considered objective in this space are going to give you that information. So that's super important. Big piece of this is your support system. You get them from two places. You get internal and you have external. Internal are allies, people who you've befriended, people who are on your team. And don't mistake this for having people like you. You can have allies and still maybe not be their BFF. They don't have to like you to be an ally for you. That's something when you're working with a coach, you can work on a lot of messaging and language surrounding how to figure out and how to have conversations with people who are colleagues and allies who might not be your friend. Because you don't need to be best friends with everybody that you work with. It's a bonus if you do, if it's genuine. That's where that people pleasing piece still comes in, is if we're doing it so people like us, or we're becoming yes people because we just want people to like us, that's not genuine. It's not authentic. And then when you need to lean on them for a support system internally or for backup, that rapport is not going to be there. Find a mentor within your space. It can be anybody senior, it can be somebody in HR, it can be somebody who's not in your division. Just find somebody who's been there who can help you through that. Again, this is an external piece, would be working with a coach. Working with a coach is a tremendous support system because impartial third party. And we're team you. That's what coaches are here for. We're here to help you move forward. So we're always going to be holding you up and helping you navigate these hard pieces. Externally, also family and friends. Having people in your corner is huge when you're a people pleaser, because there's people who you can soundboard with. And people who also may know things about you that can say to you, hey, maybe you're doing this because of this reason, or, last time we talked about this, you said XYZ. So setting up that support system, both internally and externally, is really important. Excuse me. Another thing that's important to do is create solutions. When you are a people pleaser, a lot of our solutions, again, let's go back to this first piece of this conversation, which is when we people please, we do it because we want people to like us and we prioritize people's needs over our own. When you start to think of solutions that don't include those two pieces, you're going to be better suited to have these conversations and to communicate what your boundaries, your expectations may be. I just saw something pop up in the chat. Why are family and friends considered an external support and not an internal support? Because they're not. We're talking about your career and your professional space. So internal support is internal to your workplace. External is external to your workplace. So family and friends fall outside of your workplace for this example. If you're working on people pleasing as a general rule, then you just want to set up a support system, right? You just want to set up a support system. There might not be an internal or an external. So when you're coming, I want to just jump back to this talking about solutions piece is it's amazing what happens when you create solutions that best serve you. Now, that doesn't mean to say that they might not best serve others in your organization or your team, but what you're choosing is to at least consider yourself in that conversation. Once these pieces are in place, then you have the opportunity to be able to communicate them. Communicating your messaging is super important as a people pleaser because think of the language that we tend to use as people pleasers. We self deprecate, we apologize all of the time for things, either sometimes they're not even our fault. We'll frame a conversation so that we're willing to take the fall for whatever it is, whether we did it or we didn't do it, just so that we could be the fall person so that someone else doesn't have to be in that position. So when you're communicating, you want to reframe some of that language. Change I'm sorry to thank you. That's one of the biggest things that you can do. This is one of the first things I did when I was really trying to recover from people pleasing. So instead of starting an email with "I'm sorry it took so long to get back to you," I would say, "Thank you for your patience in waiting for this answer. Thank you for understanding." Just start with "thank you." It's friendly, it's warm, it feels more genuine, and you're not apologizing for things that you did or did not do. Let me be clear. I am not suggesting that you stop apologizing. If you have done something, you need to be accountable for it. You need to own it, you need to acknowledge it, and you need to create a solution surrounding it. That's very different than apologizing for things that had nothing to do with you or apologizing for things that don't require an apology. I've also taken to letting people know when they apologize to me if it's not necessary. And that's another way I've reframed it for my own self. So I'm I'm not telling people, "Hey, don't be a people pleaser. You don't have to apologize." But I will say, "No apologies needed," and then go on with the rest of it so that we can take that chunk out of the conversation. We're talking about professional things. We're talking about professional setting. Like I said, if you've done something that requires an apology, apologize and own it. But there's a big difference between spending time on those apologies as opposed to getting to the content that you want to talk about. Next thing is your messages need to be simple. Part of what we do as people pleasers is we over explain. There's a lot of context and a lot of detail that often isn't needed to get the point across. But we as people pleasers feel that we really need to give all of that so that there's an understanding of where we came from. Sometimes you don't need all that. You want to prepare and deliver a simple message. Go back to when you were in early school years when you were first learning how to write or you were first learning how to deliver a message and the key there was 3 to 5 support points. Not different here. When you're thinking about what that message is, stick to those 3 to 5 main points that you need to hit. Somebody can always ask for more information, giving you the opportunity to tell more of the story. Something that I recommend to all of my clients, and I know a whole lot of our coaches do this as well when you're in session, is practice out loud. Did like 47 people just hop off the call when I said that out loud because that's what usually happens. No one likes this piece. What practicing out loud does for you as a people pleaser is one, it gets your mouth used to the message. It's muscle memory. If you do it in your head, You will never hear it clearly. You don't know where the starts and stops are. You don't know what words you'll get caught on, and it's not as comfortable. When you practice language out loud, one, your ears get used to hearing it, and your mouth gets used to saying it. You may catch yourself apologizing when you say it out loud that you wouldn't do it if you were doing it in your head. This starts to give you that level of comfortability and confidence that when you catch yourself doing something that's a people pleasing behavior, you'll hear it and you'll be able to use it as a trigger to reframe what you're saying and how you're saying it. What also happens when you practice out loud is you start to be able to concentrate on how people react to a simple message rather than that long diatribe that oftentimes we'll give. So practicing out loud is the key thing. You can't practice everything because you don't know what every conversation is going to be. But it does give you the ability to even practice some language that you might use or shortening and editing out some of your pieces. Really important to be able to hear yourself. With today's technology, film yourself. Again, did I lose more people there? Because that's usually when other people also drop off. We do not like the way we sound on tape. We do not like the way we look. I get that. But that's where you're going to hear. Have you changed your pitch? What does your facial expression look like? Have you self deprecated? Did you round your shoulders? Did you look down when you spoke? Or did you look somebody in the eye, pick up your chin, and say your piece? So these are important reasons for out loud practice or filming yourself as well. Something else that helps, and this is something, again, people pleasers tend not to do. We will personalize everything. Everything's about prioritizing someone else's need, talking to someone else about their thing. Want to make the distinction between being empathetic and using emotional intelligence and people pleasing, because there is a fine line, and it's sometimes hard to walk. This is a perfect opportunity to use organizational language. Try to separate some of the personal pieces and stick to what's happening in your career. How is this changing my opportunity? Let me show that I have organizational, institutional knowledge of what I'm talking about. And this is where you're starting to see the pieces that come together between your me list and between prioritizing what's important to you and determining what those opportunities look like for you. Use what's in place already. If it's something for an ask, that there's an ask involved, go back and summarize what that was. Do it in writing, do it in a one-on-one, do it with different conversation, but make sure you include what that ask is. As people pleasers, we tend to not follow up on our ask. We'll put it out there in some camouflaged type way, that sometimes isn't clear to the person who we're speaking to. So summarization, including that ask, is super important. We want to make sure that the people that we're working with know what we want. And I know that that's difficult for many of us who people please, because that's not that first step. Go back to that me list. What do you want? And then this is how we get there, because a lot of times as people pleasers, we're missing those opportunities because we're so busy worrying about everybody else and making sure that we're liked and not having that confrontation, that when we do get around to asking for something, it's not strong, it's not simple, and we don't ever really include our ask after the point. We're like, well, they should be able to figure this out because, I've really been, no, they're not figuring it out. You need to ask for what you want. When you summarize, you need to include that in your ask. When we work with clients, myself, my fellow coaches, this is probably an area that a good amount of people need a lot of support with. They're like, well, I asked once. Okay, well, now let's work on asking again. Let's work on summarizing what our ask is. Let's work on using our documentation and our support to show why this ask is important. So So this is a space where a lot of clients are stuck, not just people pleasers, just so you know. It's you see it more rampant with people who are people pleasers. Um, but you'll see it across the board. So this is a spot, if you have not clicked that link to get on board and talk to somebody on Justice's team, you're going to want to do it for this alone and work with a coach on one-on-one with practicing this out loud. So then next step on all of this, I wish I had like a red marker. I would like circle this 100 times and put arrows and stars to it. Follow up. People pleasers do not follow up. If we get enough courage and enough confidence to speak up, in our minds, we've said it. They should have heard that. And we don't follow up, which is a challenge. This is probably one of the most crucial pieces to break people pleasing behavior is follow up with what you want. Understanding your wants don't have to be kick in the door and threaten people wants. That's not always a good way to handle things either. But you may have wants, you may have asks. They might not be surrounding salary and promotion. Maybe it's about working with a colleague on a project or just getting a response from something that you need to have done, and you're like, well, I don't know if I want to ask again. They might not like me. Well, that's part of being in a professional setting, is learning how to have that conversation. Because people pleasing isn't just at that high level. Hey, how come I got overlooked for that promotion? Or how come I'm never asked to lead a project? It can be as little as, you know what? Sam never responds to me. Sam never gives me what I need to do my job, and that's reflecting on me. You need to be able to learn how to ask, how to follow up on some of these pieces. And it's hard. Someone asked a question, is there a difference between people pleasing and being a yes person? No, that's part of being a people pleaser, is being a yes person. And there is somewhat of a fine line between doing your job and being supportive of colleagues and just being a yes person. People pleasing, part of the definition is being a yes person, because there's no thought process when you're a yes person. It's if you're asked to do it, you're just going to say yes without thought to how does it affect you? How does it affect your team if you're in a leadership position? How does it affect organizational goals? A lot of times as people pleasers, we'll just say yes to whoever is more senior to us because we think that's the right way. People who are just yes people aren't learning, they're not growing. And honestly, you're not helping your senior leadership either, because they're not learning and growing or getting any feedback either to what may change. Again, I'm not suggesting you kick a door in and challenge every little thing. I'm suggesting that you be mindful of asking for what you want that impacts you in the way that's going to be most receptive and most profitable for you. Ultimately, these things typically help your team, because it's actually hard to work with a people pleaser. And those on this call who have worked with me know that it is difficult, because oftentimes we'll overextend ourselves. We'll overpromise the things that we can't deliver because we don't want to say no to anything. We don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. We want everybody to like us. That's a struggle, because then you're still not hitting your benchmarks that you need to hit. Okay, would love for you to think about what we talked about today. What's the first step that you can do for you? I can tell you, for me, it was learning how to set some boundaries. Yes, at 50 something years old, I was learning how to set boundaries, and I've had a successful career up till then. But I I didn't want anyone to ever say, "Oh, Shari doesn't pull her weight. Oh, Shari doesn't take responsibility for those things." So I let my boundaries be very, very blurry. so that I could pick and choose how that worked. So what's one of the first things that you're going to do? Drop it in the chat. While you're typing, I'm going to take this opportunity to blow my nose one more time. Okay, so no one dropped anything in the chat to tell me what your first step is. Oh, I'm seeing a couple things coming in now. Examine when, why, and how I'm people pleasing. And that'll go a long way to help you create your me list of what that looks like for you. What else are you doing? What else can you do? First step is recognizing that you're people pleasing, and that's really hard because nobody wants to think of themselves that way. I want to say that for myself, I didn't think that I was a people pleaser until I started working with people who weren't people pleasers. And I looked around and said, wow, look what they're doing. I would have never done that, or I don't do that. There's a lot of good stuff going back and forth in the chat. I would love for you to look at what each other's saying in this space, because these may be things that you didn't consider doing. And these are the different kind of ways, by enacting some of these things, to be able to create the career that you're really interested in having. And I know when Justice spoke at the beginning, she talked about being able to be in touch with him, to talk about coaching, to meet with his team. Super important to be able to have that open door, to have that conversation, to come to these webinars, to understand where your resources are to get that support. When we do a ton of different levels of coaching to help you do this. I want to talk a little bit about what that is, but I'm wondering if Justice can pop back on for me and help me through some of this, just to help me talk through some of this. I like what somebody said in here about asking people for their observations of them people pleasing. So hard to do that. And that's part of what we want to learn to do to overcome people pleasing, is to be able to ask for that level of feedback, so that you can learn how to change what that conversation looks like. Justice, are you with me? Did you come back?
I am. I'm here.
You are back. Oh, good. I was looking for you. I know I did my own chat today, so that's why. I'm just asking people, I was asking our group if they could just talk about what something that they may take as a first action step to stop people pleasing from things that we talked about. And I was starting to talk about how you actually can create this career that you love. And I know that you have some good resourcing and information about things that ALV can support with. So I just wanted you to hop back on to help everybody understand that.
Yeah, absolutely.
As well.
I'll actually take over the sharing real quick for you.
Oh,
So,
okay, terrific. I'm just going to let everybody know I'm still here because we're going to do a Q&A. So everyone can hang around with their questions. And I love what you're dropping in the chat. So while Justice is talking to you, I'm going to read through so I can talk to it too.
yes, and then Shari, let me know if there's something in the chat that I should address while I'm talking, okay?
Awesome, you got it.
Awesome. So what if by this time next year, you had healthy relationships that nourished you in your life, had a career you actually enjoyed going to each day, confidence and clarity around how to achieve your goals. And those are all some of the things that you can achieve with coaching. And you guys have even like notified your first step or acknowledged your first step. So in working with a coach, our coaches help you get aligned by helping you define your vision for the future, helping you develop meaningful goals and plans to achieve them, and then understanding yourself better and to help recognize the blind spots along the way. And then once you have all of these kind of out in front of you, they help you actually meet your goals by managing the transitions, creating work-life balance, establishing healthy routines, and identifying what really derails you so you really just are more in tune with yourself as you work to achieve those. And then in addition to that, they also just help you build your toolbox overall by developing courage, confidence, and your self-worth throughout, by refining negative self-talk and building and strengthening the relationships around you, be it in your career, in your life, or whatever aspect that you really want to come to coaching to achieve. And in addition to working through all of that, in working with an Ama La Vida coach, there are a ton of bonuses that come with your membership. The first of which is our Slack channel. And what's nice about that is it has all of our current clients as well as all of our coaches. So it's a really healthy environment we've been able to create where people post job descriptions, webinars, seminars, discussion posts, mindfulness tips and tricks, and all sorts of things like that. But what else is really cool is that our coaches who are constantly creating new content, for example, we have these weekly free webinars where the topics are always changing, as well as they're always making and sharing blog posts. And if anybody was to ever post something that kind of caught your eye, you wanted to lean into or explore a little bit more about, you would then have the opportunity to substitute any of the sessions with your main coach with any other coach on the team. So we call these celebrity sessions. So not only do you have your main coach, but you have our entire team of coaches behind you should you ever want to explore any sort of niche skill set, resource, or expertise that they could bring to the table. That's something that's super unique to Ama La Vida and that a lot of clients find a lot of value in and when choosing to engage with us. Additionally, we have member-only events. You can meet like-minded individuals and just gain expertise, knowledge, and things that are supplementary to what you're currently working on with your coach. We also have our own e-coaching program. So these are additional online courses that you'll work through with your coach. Coach will assign them to you as appropriate throughout your journey. And things like, creating transitioning, working through imposter syndrome. And they're really going to be these homework assignments, if you will, that are really going to help you optimize the time in between your coaching sessions. The bonuses alone that come with the membership are valued at over $500, but our coaching investment starts at $339 a month with your first session free since you are coming to us from a webinar event. So if anyone does have an interest in this, I'm going to, again, post the link to my calendar as well as our website where you can read a little bit more about us and the types of coaching we do, as well as the coaches themselves in case anybody in particular stands out to you. Would love to explore a conversation further around that. But in addition to that, I'm also going to post our Eventbrite and YouTube links in case anybody wants to see previously recorded webinars as well as upcoming webinars that we do have planned for the rest of the year. And then here is my and Shari's email. If anybody has just direct questions that they would like to ask us, we'd be more than happy to continue a conversation further. But with all of that being said, Shari, are you still with me? Or are you ready to do a little Q&A?
I am. I also just want to remind people about those so couple of things that you said that I want to remind people of. First of all, those emails go to Justice and I know that's sometimes you think you're going someplace else so that you can go into some kind of email jail situation. Those go directly to our email boxes. That's another distinction that ALV has, is that we give you access and we'll answer our email. So just know that those are in fact going to our emails. And I think in the chat, I put my little arrows up. Check out the YouTube channel. The value and the insane value of content that's there is crazy. Again, when you coach with ALV, you have access to all of our coaches, but as a non-member, you can just go there. But any of my clients who are on this call know I use a ton of our content just to share. I saw a couple things come up in the chat, Justice, that I just want to talk to. I saw a couple of things about boundary setting and how to feel comfortable doing that in terms of when you first start a job. How do you do that so that you're not coming off as like a hard ass, or you want to be able to just set that tone? And a lot of that is in how you deliver the message. That's that key about being really clean and crisp and simple in your message. You don't need to offer a lot of explanations um, for things because they tend to be apologies. It can really just be, hey, I don't pick up emails after 7 p.m., but I'll get back to you first thing in the morning. Or if you really need me after that time, please send me a text. Like, there's ways to provide solution and boundaries that are not negative, especially when you're starting a new job. When you start a new job, mostly being curious for the first little bit to get the lay of the land is helpful to know where that falls in and know who the players are. You're always over eager to please when you start because you just want everyone to like you and you want to do a good job. And that falls into people pleasing territory. So you do want to be mindful of that balance for yourself. Um, Also saw a question surrounding the guilt that comes with people pleasing that we talked at the beginning, that's one of the results. And that's one of the things that dissipates when you start to understand the value that you bring. So when you get over this prioritizing people ahead of you, and again, this is not always absolute, right? Sometimes it's appropriate to put somebody ahead of your own needs. There that every time you do it doesn't make you a people pleaser. There's a piece of this that's being a good colleague, being a good coworker, being collaborative, and then there's another piece of just doing it all the time for no good reason. And that's where that you have to strike that balance, and it's not easy. But let's say, for example, that you work a flex schedule and you take an hour or two off in the middle of the day to do something that's helpful to you, and you feel guilty because everybody knew you were out of the office. Well, that's something for you to say, hey, I okayed this with I have flexible scheduling. I'm getting my job done. I'm bringing value. My last one-on-one, I had this conversation with my team lead, and they said I'm bringing value. So I'm doing fine. Or I take this time because it's not productive work time for me. So instead, I get back into my work later in the evening because that works better for me, and I've permission to do that. Those things are okay. There's no reason to have resentment or guilt surrounding things that are okay to do. Again, those are things you check with leadership. But if those things are okay, then you do what you do and feel confident that you are getting the feedback that matches the results that you're looking for. Somebody else asked a question about the distinction between being a kind person and a people pleaser. And this is um, really hard because there is a huge element that we want to bring into the workplace now about showing compassion, being empathetic, using emotional intelligence when we're dealing with coworkers versus people pleasing. The difference a lot of times lies in how are we prioritizing ourself in those interactions. You can be kind and not put someone's needs over your own on the regular. So a lot of this has to do with consistency. If you put somebody's needs over your own every now and again, because it's what best suits the situation or it's the kindness that's needed for that colleague, that's fine. That's being kind. If you put a colleague's needs above your own all the time, regardless of how it affects you, that's people pleasing. And I know the line is blurry. And that's probably why so many of us became people pleasers because that line is really blurry and we want to make sure that we're still being kind to people, but learning how to set our own boundaries. So that would be the distinction that I see is how often are you doing it? There is an element of this that also needs us to find our voices in terms of setting those boundaries, but hoping that others are also. So this is when if someone asks something of you, it's okay to say, I can't give that my attention right now, but I will at 2. The key there is giving it your attention at 2. That follow through piece is what builds the credibility and changes you from a reliable partner to just a people pleaser. Because people pleasers are the ones who just say, "Oh yeah, I'll do that later," and then they don't. And that's hard when you're in a work situation. I did I miss questions because I tried to go through the chat really quickly. So if anyone's on the call, if I didn't answer your questions, feel free to come off mute and ask or drop it in the chat and say, hey, you didn't answer my question because I will be happy to do so. If you also have any questions about what coaching looks and feels like, Feel free to ask. I don't mind answering those questions either about what it's like to coach with ALV. This is my style of coaching, but we have lots of different coaches here. So feel free to ask questions. I'm happy to answer them because we do have a few minutes before we're supposed to end today. I see someone raise their hand. Is that Alfred? Alfred, feel free, speak.
Oh, hi. I was going to try to type it in, but I'm not a quick typist. Could you speak to this dynamic? A lot of this can be static, but there's other people involved. When we have gaslighters or people who when we try to do everything you say we should do, and they throw it back on us. Can you speak to that dynamic?
Can you give me a little bit of a more clear example so I know what I'm answering for you? I don't want to answer something that you didn't ask.
Sure. When someone throws it, when you actually are trying to set a boundary, get some clarity, and someone's throwing it back at you as you're at fault, you're to blame, they make you feel negative and less than for not complying with their wishes.
So this is where earlier today, I think I talked a little bit about documentation. This is where that will come in handy in asking for clarity. Here's what I heard you say. That puts people in they don't love that, because if that's not what they said, that's not what I meant. Oh, okay, that's what you said. So this is where documentation comes in handy. Hey, back at that last meeting, here's what I have that we agreed on. So a lot of times just sticking with facts and depersonalizing it is helpful in those cases. And know that nothing is 100%, Alfred. We're never going to win everybody. We're never going to have people who just totally stand in line with I say this and they say this and they follow the script. Oftentimes it's being consistent in doing that. Like if this person is consistently making you feel less than, one, we have to figure out why are you feeling less than and deal with that challenge, which coaching is tremendously helpful for. But then we also have to work on consistency in the messaging you're getting until someone realizes it and responds differently. What tends to happen to us is we don't stay consistent with that messaging because we get thrown. We're like, oh, they didn't respond the way they're supposed to. I'm going to change how I respond. You stay consistent with your messaging. And that's what's going to happen over and over and over again.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Someone just threw, actually, I see something in the chat that someone threw your way, and it's true. Go back to simple messaging. If you over-explain, a gaslighter will exploit that. Every time, Bean, you're 100% right. Every time. That's why you keep those messages simple. They don't need that level of context in any way, shape, or form. Does anybody else have any questions?
Thank you so much, Alfred.
All right, I think we're good.
All right. Well, thank you so much for everything today, Shari. And thank you everyone for joining us. Like you said, you've got those links, but everything in the recording will be coming tomorrow. So look out for that. Get in contact. We'd love to continue a conversation, and we hope to see you at a future event. But everyone have a great day.